Jessica, born in Leeds in 1983, was the eldest of 6 children, and her father described her as a calm and happy child who never caused any bother or trouble. She was close to her family. Her sister Manal was just 18 months apart from her, and she described Jessica as a fun and happy person. She said, "I was always really close with Jessica. Growing up, she wasn't very loud, but she was very nurturing in nature, and she was definitely romantic. She loved Bollywood films and dreamed of having her own love story one day." Jessica had a deep desire to help other people, and so wanted to be a pharmacist. She attended De Montfort University in the early 2000s, and then Manchester University after. Whilst at De Montfort, she had started a relationship with Mitesh Patel. So when she had first met as a child, the relationship ended shortly after, but was later rekindled. They both had similar backgrounds and came from large Hindu families. When they first started dating, Jessica's mother was unwell, and Mitesh was there to support his partner, showering her with gifts. In July 2009, Mitesh and Jessica were married. After living with his family following the wedding, the couple moved to Linthorpe, Middlesbrough, and bought the pharmacy on Roman Road. Although it was a busier area, locals described it as safe and happy as they owned the local pharmacy. The Patels soon became a big part of their community. They also bought a house on the avenue, which they did up and started their new life together. The couple were well liked, but also private. With everything seemingly falling into place for them, the next step was to start their own family. As Jessica was the oldest sibling, she had strong maternal instincts and wanted to become a mother. However, this did not come easily to them. They had fertility problems. Following several rounds of IVF, they had frozen embryos at a Darlington clinic. Monday, the 14th of May, 2018, began as normal. Mitesh and Jessica went to work, with her father stopping by the pharmacy. He remembered seeing his daughter smiling, and they agreed he would stop by again the following week. Mitesh took the earlier shift before heading to the gym later in the day. At 8:20 p.m., the 999 call was made. Despite the best efforts of the emergency services, at just 34 years old, Jessica was gone. Manal said she received a call from her younger sister saying that something had happened in Middlesbrough and that their father was on his way there. As morning rolled around, she woke up and her husband was sat on their bed. She immediately knew that something was wrong. He told her that her beloved sister had died in the night. She then called her father, who confirmed the heartbreaking news. Police quickly sealed off the crime scene to preserve any evidence and minimize any potential risk of cross-contamination. Mitesh explained that Jessica had been at work until around 7 p.m. and that evening he had gone to the pharmacy as he needed to collect his laptop. After this, he went to pick up some food, a pizza from his local takeaway. Around half an hour after he left, he was back at their house. When he went inside, Jessica was on the floor, in the living room, by the window. Her hands and feet have been bound with duct tape. She was cold and wasn't responding. Tape had been used to tie her feet and hands together. The house had been ransacked. 3 ambulances alongside police were on scene, trying to ascertain exactly what had happened. Mitesh told police that he had only been gone for around half an hour, leaving at 7:44 p.m. The family was shattered. They came together to support each other. They traveled to be with Mitesh, and Manal said when she saw him, he buried his head into her shoulder and began to sob. It appeared that there was no sexual motive for the killing, meaning the police had to try and find a motive, Who would want Jessica dead? And why? The street woke up to a heavy police presence. Word began to spread that there had been a murder on the street. The community couldn't believe it, as Jessica was well known and well liked. She was a big part of her community, and people were incredibly fond of her. As there was no sign of a forced entry, police concluded she must have known her attacker and let them in. So they started to look at Jessica's inner circle to rule people out. The CCTV from the pizza shop helped to establish a timeline. It showed that when Mitesh was out giving them a time frame for Jessica's murder, a post-mortem was conducted. It revealed her cause of death was asphyxiation. Pressure had been applied to her neck and had also suggested that a ligature of some kind had been used. On Thursday, Jessica's family was still with Mitesh when they got a call from the family liaison officers who asked them to go home as they needed to speak to them. They explained that they were arresting a suspect on suspicion of murder. Mitesh Patel was arrested. Jessica's family and the local community was stunned. How could this seemingly loving husband and pillar of the community commit such a brutal offense? During the search of the home, police have found a hard drive in the bedroom that linked to the house's CCTV system, something Mitesh had failed to mention. The hard drive that stored the footage from the cameras was safely secured away in a cupboard, so if someone were to break in, they wouldn't be able to find the hard drive and destroy the footage. But of course, it wasn't there. It was up in the bedroom. Officers checked the footage. At 3:30 p.m., Mitesh arrived home from the gym and didn't leave the house. Jessica arrived home at 7 p.m. He left the house at 7:44 p.m. and returned at 8:15. However, nobody else was seen on the footage, going into or coming out of the house. 6 minutes before he called emergency services, the CCTV had been disconnected. A suitcase full of clothes was also found under the bed. When police had conducted a search of the pharmacy, they found jewelry, 25,000 pounds, and gold bars hidden in a safe. They also found a plastic bag with 2,000 pounds in it. Police decided to delve deeper into his phone to try and build their case. One of the things they looked at was the iPhone Health app that both he and Jessica had used. One feature of the iPhone Health app is that it can track a user's steps and heart rate. It showed that minutes following after the murder, Mitesh's phone tracked him racing throughout the house. From 7:04 p.m., Jessica's didn't move. 40 minutes later, it showed that her phone moved 14 steps to outside. Mitesh had moved her phone so that it appeared it had been dropped by a burglar following the break-in. When he returned home, the health app showed that he had climbed the stairs before calling the emergency services a couple of minutes later. It is believed that during this time, he was hiding the CCTV hard drive. Mitesh Patel was subsequently charged with the murder of his wife. He would plead not guilty. Her sister Manal would say that 95% of what came out in court, her family were completely unprepared for. As the trial of Mitesh Patel began, the true nature of what had transpired would be laid bare, and his web of lies would begin to unravel. Mitesh confessed that he had been using the app Grindr and other apps to meet men. He told the court that in his culture, using such apps was considered shameful. He said, "I cannot explain how I felt. It was the fear of being exposed as an Asian gay man, and I was going to let Jess down. One thing is the truth. I have not anything to do with Jessica's killing, But amongst those who worked at the pharmacy, his use of Grindr was an open secret. They thought Jessica was unaware, but he was often seen on the app and was even captured on CCTV in an embrace with a man he had met on there. However, Jessica was aware of his extramarital affairs with men. Not long after their wedding, he had begun an affair with a male doctor, Dr. Patel. The affair would continue for 8 years, with him repeatedly telling her that it was over. Amit had moved thousands of miles away to Australia, and despite his protestations that it was over, Jessica would find Mitesh on the phone with him. She had confided in a family member about it, explaining that Mitesh would be on the phone for hours with this man, and that hers and Mitesh's sexual relationship was now non-existent. Several weeks before her death, Jessica found out he was back on Grindr and other apps every day and meeting men. And a few days before the murder, he had met with a man and they had exchanged phone numbers. Mitesh said, however, he did not have sexual contact with this man. The data from his phone also showed that he had been using the app the day Jessica had died. After learning of the extent of his unfaithfulness and that he had brought men back to the marital home, Jessica didn't want to try another round of IVF. The prosecution argued that this was a planned out and callous murder, with Mitesh researching for years how to stage a fake crime scene and how to commit a perfect murder. When what had actually happened to Jessica that night was laid bare, it left the courtroom horrified. She had been injected with insulin, rendering her unable to fight back. After this, he began going around the house to stage the fake break-in. It is believed that Jessica likely started at this point, as she was still alive. Mitesh then suffocated her with a plastic bag. The bag had been ripped, indicating that Jessica had desperately tried to rip it off her face during the attack. Mitesh denied this, saying they were happy and content together. He said, "I didn't need other mates. She was my best mate. She was my wife. I could tell her everything." Despite what he had said, more damning evidence would emerge. The court heard how he had changed his story. First telling police he hadn't seen Jessica since lunchtime, then admitting to being in the house with her for around 42 minutes after she got back at 7 p.m. When data from his computer was analyzed, it showed that over the past few years, he had searched for how to hire a hitman in the UK, plot to kill my wife, and also insulin overdose. These searches dated back to 2013. Various life insurance policies have been taken out at different times, totaling around £2 million, with the first one being made after he had made the computer searches.
Conviction reflects the enormity of Mitesh Patel's crime, who for his own devious reasons, which included pre-planning the murder for financial gain to the tune of £2 million, took Jess's life.
Police also found internet history on Patel's laptop that showed he'd been planning the murder to start a new life on the other side of the world with his boyfriend. He'd searched a range of subjects, including Hindu funeral, strangulation, selling a business, moving to Australia, and even making a search for "I need to kill my wife." Leaving some at his trial almost incredulous, he told the court he and Jessica had researched these subjects together as he continued to blame her death on a mystery intruder.
It was his plan to murder his wife, obtain the money from the life insurance policy, take the embryo she had frozen, and go to Australia to be with Amit. There, they would raise the child as their own. While talking about the insurance policy, the prosecution said he was planning to use the money to start a new life in Australia, and that life would be shared with the person who he really loved, the one who he regarded as his soulmate, another man. When he went to the pharmacy at the night of the murder to pick up his laptop, police believe Jessica was already dead by this point, and staff noticed 3 scratches on his neck. He was seen by workers going into the pharmacy storeroom, which wasn't a part of the building he would usually go into. In court, Mitesh's lies continued to be exposed. It emerged that he had lied to his trainer and said that he and Jessica shared baby twins together. He said that after being unable to start a family, having 3 rounds of IVF was a source of shame for him. In December 2012, her younger sister had seen messages between Mitesh and Amit saying how much they loved each other. Manal said, "When we told Jessica about the message from Amit, Mitesh blamed her for meddling and not trusting him. Jessica told her family to leave it, and by the next year, the couple had moved away to Linthorpe." Throughout the investigation, police had uncovered more about this apparently happy couple. IVF was an incredibly difficult and physically exhausting experience. The investigation revealed that Mitesh had secretly taken a drug that would suppress the sperm count, making it improbable that Jessica would conceive naturally. Her father later found out that Mitesh had threatened to end the marriage if she did not continue with the IVF treatment. In April of 2016, she had confided in her GP that she felt pressure to conceive and subsequently had cognitive therapy. She would later be prescribed medication for her depression and anxiety. The truth about their relationship continued to come out. Not long after they had married, Jessica's grandfather had become ill and was nearing the end of his life. Jessica wanted to be with him and her family. Mitesh refused. As they were driving one night, Jessica was begging him to let her be with her grandfather. In response, Mitesh hit her. He had also thrown a mobile phone at her, and she was seen limping by pharmacy staff. Staff members in the pharmacy had also seen him shout at her and reduce her to tears by throwing and kicking things in the dispensary. As the abuse and control continued, she became more and more withdrawn and isolated. She was also losing weight. Nicola Taylor, a forensic scientist, also testified at the trial. When the police arrived on scene, the two had seen the scratch marks on his neck, something he attributed to his session at the gym. DNA from Jessica's fingernails came back as a match to Mitesh, showing that she had been the one to scratch him. Well, this wasn't the only DNA evidence shown to the court. His DNA was also found on the plastic bag used to kill her, and her blood and saliva was on the inside. Not only that, his DNA was also found on the tape that bound Jessica's hands and feet. Despite the argument that it had got there when he pulled the tape off, no other DNA was found on it. Tape was found in the pharmacy, and police believe that he had hidden it there when he had gone to collect his laptop. The jury was shown his police interview. In the interview, he was asked about his movements that evening. Mitesh didn't cooperate and offered no information. He simply said, "There is nothing to tell." And after 12 days of trial, it was time for the jury to deliberate and consider their verdict. The jury would deliberate for just under 3 hours. Mitesh Patel was found guilty. Jessica's sister Divya read a statement on behalf of the family to the court. "The one thing we hoped and prayed for above anything else was that in her final moments, she did not suffer. The cruel reality is that she did in fact suffer. She knew exactly who her killer was, and he mercilessly ignored her attempts to fight for her own life as he ended it. We can only imagine the fear and panic she must have felt knowing herself this was it. Thinking of that moment makes our hearts so heavy. Mitesh Patel was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murder of his wife, Jessica. The judge explained that a 30-year minimum term was only used in cases where the crime was particularly severe, adding, "This is such a case." Following his sentence, Jessica's family gave a statement.
Since that tragic day of the 14th of May, we have tied our brains into knots, agonizing over what may have happened, going through every scenario, trying to put together a puzzle for which we had none of the pieces. What we have learned over the last few weeks has been truly shocking and beyond even our worst nightmares. It is still incomprehensible that this has happened and that she has gone. A life sentence will never be enough. We will never get Jessica back, and her dreams and wishes will remain unfulfilled. However, we as a family take some solace in that an element of justice has been served and that the right person has been convicted and will remain behind bars for decades to come. We would like to thank everyone associated with this case who have worked tirelessly in aiding our fight to get justice for Jessica. The Senior Investigating Officer, Family Liaison Officers, and the team at Cleveland Police. The CPS, the leading counsel, Mr. Campbell QC, and junior counsel, Mr. Perks. A huge amount of work has been undertaken to ensure the right outcome, and we cannot find the words to express how immensely grateful we are for all their efforts. We would also like to thank all our family and friends who have supported us through this extremely difficult time. It is clear just how loved Jessica was by everyone that knew her. Jessica will never be forgotten, and we hope and pray that she is at peace now. We will always be a part of her, as she will always be a part of us.
And that's all for the case today. Thank you all for watching, and let me know about your thoughts on this case in the comment section below.